John suspects his wife Karen is hiding something. One night, she rushes out in a tight black dress, claiming to meet friends. But John knows she's seeing Carl Jensen. When John confronts her, the tension erupts. Later, at a party, John witnesses Karen and Carl share a secret kiss. Furious, John gathers evidence, placing a thick envelope on the table, ready to confront Karen with the truth. The calm before the storm is over. Their lives are about to be torn apart. She hardly looked at me as she rushed into the kitchen. A simple hello or a friendly smile would have been nice, but all she did was smooth her dress. She glanced nervously over her shoulder and said, "Remember, I'm out with the girls today. I have my phone, but only call if it's serious." I stared at her for a moment before I replied. I couldn't help but think about how she expected me to believe that the tight black dress she wore was for a day out with friends. The makeup and perfume seemed too much for that. Did she really think other girls wanted to see each other dressed like this? I should have felt angry that she thought so little of me. I should have been upset by her choices, but I wasn't angry because I knew I deserved it. She had kept me in the dark about her other relationships for much longer than she should have. I felt like a fool, the kind of fool who trusts someone too much, the type of person who opens up to others, the type of person who trusts them completely. A mistake was made, and now it's clear. I need to fix this. Before you leave, I finally said, "Please sit down for a moment. We have something to discuss." She didn't even look back, just let out a frustrated noise as she searched her bag and said, "I'm sorry, but I really need to go. I'm already late." I prepared myself for her to get mad. I clenched the beer bottle tightly, but nothing came. No anger, no shouting, no hard feelings. This cold attitude had become normal for her recently. She brushed me off. She ignored the kids. She turned away from herself, and now we're all used to it, but not anymore. It was time to take a stand. I tossed the key she was searching for onto the table. "I get that you're in a hurry," I said sharply. "Trust me, I understand that. But if you leave and spend another evening with Carl Jensen without talking to me, I suggest you don't come back here." She stopped in her tracks, her hand still in her purse for what felt like a long time, but she didn't say anything. "What?" She finally spoke, her voice shaky and hard to believe. "What did you say?" "It will only take a minute," I said. "Come sit down with me and let's talk." She hesitated for another moment, not turning around or responding. She held her purse tightly, as if it was her only protection. But it wasn't. Finally, she sighed deeply. Her hands dropped and she turned to face me. She looked guilty everywhere except into my eyes. They moved around like a scared animal, lost and hopeless. She sat down slowly in the chair across from me. She glanced at me many times without really meeting my gaze. "John," she finally said, I'm really sorry." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Oh no. Did she really think saying sorry would change anything? How lazy can you be?" "Sorry for what?" I asked, pretending to be surprised. "I'm really curious about what you've done. Do you think saying sorry will make it all better?" She bit her lip and looked down at the table. Her finger traced shapes on the wood. "I don't think it will help. I know I've made a big mess, even if you don't believe me. But for what it's worth, I'm sorry about what happened. That was all." I smiled. "Be generous, stay calm. The first step is done." "Thank you for not lying to me," I said sincerely. "Not that it makes a difference. No lie could change what I know. But now I think maybe I was right to stay." She looked a little scared. "You're not leaving?" I don't want you to go," she whispered. "I don't love him, John. I truly don't. I raised my hand to signal for her to stop. Quiet. When I saw her ready to take action, a strong feeling grew inside me. Don't hurt her, no matter what. It would be so easy to do, so quick. But if you start, you might never stop. I know you won't. I frowned, showing him how important that thought was to me. Or at least I think you don't. Anyway, I've already heard all your little reasons. Heard? She looked puzzled. What do you mean? Well, you know. So far, everything is going as planned. Ignore that tight feeling in your stomach. Remember what's important. You're doing really well. Don't mess it up now. It's simple. I shrugged. I listened when you said those things to him. If it was possible, She turned even paler and shrank back in her chair. You heard us. I just looked at her, keeping my face calm, and she turned her gaze away. Her eyes looked shiny. Brilliant, I suppose, is the best word to describe them. She took a deep breath. What are you going to do? I know it seems like I don't care about you right now, but I really do. I don't want to lose what we have. It would break my heart if you left. I nodded. I understand. Like I said, I heard you talking about this. I don't need to say it again. I could have ended things between us easily at any point. I could have chosen to take charge and finish everything for you. But I didn't think about that. About what? I leaned in closer. I picked up the heavy envelope and watched her closely. I set it on the table. It was full, almost ready to burst. I ran my hand over the top and gave it a pat for effect. Inside this envelope is everything I know about your situation. She took a sharp breath and looked at it again, noticing how thick it was. Her eyes grew wide. I let her come to terms with what this meant for one long, tense minute. You can read it later. I'm not going to keep anything from you, and I'll do my best to be clear about everything. I stopped for a moment to rub my eyes with my fingers. I took a deep breath. I had everything ready. Now, the hard part was about to start. She looked at the envelope like it was a snake. "It's so thick," she whispered. I nodded and patted it again, liking the sound my hand made on the big pile. Once I started to look into your stuff, finding out what you were up to was easy. You weren't trying very hard to keep it a secret. I thought you trusted me. I believed things would be safe that way. I did trust you, and I still do. I promise it won't happen again. She nodded quickly. And it shouldn't. I'm sorry, John. Please let me fix this. If you agree to stay, I will. I've already told you, I said softly. I'll stay, and I won't try to push you away. I know how far that would go. No. If anyone is going to file for divorce, it will be you. I saw her shocked expression, but I focused on what I wanted to say. It really took me a long time to understand my feelings and what I needed to do to get through this. I spent an hour talking with a lawyer, a day looking up information online, and weeks thinking deeply about it all. Tonight was just the beginning. I took a deep breath and went on. But my staying here depends on one important thing. I spoke clearly and firmly like a leader. I've thought this over a lot, and while I know you may still care about me, I can't just turn off my feelings for you because things have changed. The idea of us being together again is off the table now. She frowned and opened her mouth to say something, but I raised my hand to pause her. Your choices and how you got caught up in this situation show me that I can't give you what my old friend is giving you now. You mentioned it yourself. You told him that you have the best of both worlds with me. You have love, care, and family with him. You have someone who makes you feel alive. I winced at that. With us together, you get love and attention. She trembled a bit, hearing her own words. I'm sorry I said that, but it isn't true. It's just... She hesitated, maybe realizing how hard it was to make me believe what she had just said, or maybe thinking of all the other things I must have heard. I'm truly sorry about how things turned out, she said after a moment. But I'm confused by what you're telling me. She took another deep breath. Things hadn't been as calm as I had hoped. I guess nothing ever is. Listen, I said, we live in 3 main realities. First, you and I care for each other in some way. It doesn't matter if it's the same type of care or not. The truth is we both feel it, and we have our families too. We share memories. We might even have a future together. When I said this, she seemed to brighten a bit. But here are the other 2 realities. You have someone else in your life, and I don't have feelings for you anymore, or for anyone else, really. You've done a good job at making sure I feel this way, but I won't say it out loud. Not to you, not to anyone. But that's not your concern anymore. Then what? At the start of what I was saying, I saw her smile fade. John, she began, I really don't want to lose you if I can help it. I took a deep breath and stuck to what I had planned to say. I don't want you to be sad, and I really don't want you coming to me, trying to get close in a way that I can't or don't want anymore. There's just hurt ahead for both of us. So I took a deep breath and prepared for the worst. My time in this marriage depends on you keeping your relationship with him. She started to respond, her body tensed, and her eyes grew wide as she heard my words. It's not a joke, John. I nodded because I was completely serious. If your feelings for him or for me change at all, I need you to talk to me. We should protect the kids from the hard parts of our separation. Other than that, you handle your life and I'll handle mine. We can keep things running as usual. You can even see him more often if that's what you want. That's what you wanted, right? To spend more time together. We both almost had a terrible experience that night. You didn't even know how close it was. After listening to the tape and looking at the pictures, I managed to walk up the stairs. It was the first time I knew for sure what I had only suspected before. I was so angry. I felt crushed. I truly believed I was empty inside. And there you were, sleeping peacefully and happily, full of joy about your life. I felt sick to my stomach. I stood by your side and pictured our last moments together clearly in my mind. Then you turned over and woke up. Your eyes blinked open. You looked at me with concern. You reached out and gently touched my arm, asking if I was all right. When you spoke, you sat up, and all your happiness seemed to fade away. You sounded like you really cared about me. I shook my head, trying to forget that moment. You frowned, thinking about what I said or maybe wondering what I hadn't said. Jim, you said, some of the things I mentioned when we were... Don't do it, I told her. Just don't. You're making a big mistake. The best thing you've done is to be honest with me. You must see that. So why would you want to change that now? I can't stand to see the sadness in your eyes if you start to hide things from me. I want you to tell me where you are and what you're planning, but I don't need to know all the details or talk too much about it. The only reason I want to know when you're with him is because it's safer for everyone. She scrunched her nose. I'm not going out with him, John. You can't be serious about this. Her eyes looked deeply into mine. Are you serious, like it's a life or death situation? It's not the best choice we have, but the best choice isn't an option anymore. So I chose this one. You can go along with it, or we can start discussing separation. But if you don't want the marriage to break down and all your family to learn about what's been happening, this is how it has to be. I don't understand what you're doing. I gave a sad smile. I guess you know a bit about how I've felt these past weeks. But why don't you want me to stop? I really want to. Maybe more than anything, I want to never see you again and just be with my kids. Then it hit me what she was really saying. You're the one in the wrong, Karen, not me. There's no trick here. I'm not trying to fool you or make plans against you. Honestly, I don't have the energy for that anymore. I looked at my watch. You need to go now, or he'll start to worry. She shivered, and I noticed she realized how she was dressed today. You feel foolish, don't you? Good. Come on, John, she pleaded. Can I just stay home? Not tonight, okay? I really mean it. No way. I said a bit too loudly, making her jump a little. To be honest, I didn't care what they talked about. They could chat about how awful I am or how weak I seem. Go ahead, have fun, watch a movie, eat ice cream, whatever you like. But you have a date tonight and you need to go. I have a right to feel sorry for myself sometimes. And you can't be here when I do that. No way, I can't. I could see she was surprised by how firm I was. Are you really serious about this? She asked. You really won't leave me? Do you still care about me? I'm not leaving you. I'm here to stay. And yes, I still care about you, I replied. She looked at me for a moment, then stared down at the table and finally gave a small nod. I won't pretend to understand, she said slowly. But I would be silly not to accept your offer, right? I guess that's what many people think. She got up slowly, her figure highlighted by her dress. I looked away. I hadn't liked staring at strangers since her situation started 3 months ago. Karen had really changed. She had always looked nice, but in college, she had a bit of extra weight around her middle that didn't go away. Now that extra weight was gone. I had never seen her look so fit and pretty. She had spent a lot on new clothes and even traded her mom's old van for a shiny white SUV. She felt like a new person. It seemed like Carl had helped her change to a different way of living. Maybe he had given her a chance to step away from being a wife and mother, even if just for a bit. I didn't know or care much about that. What I did know was that all these changes were making her obvious. It was the SUV and how much she liked it that finally got me to speak up. She wanted that car because it looked like her partner's. The two of them thought it was sweet to have matching cars. She bit her lip. What time should I be home? She asked, looking unsure. I thought to myself, you always come back from your outings around 10. But that was mostly to keep up the stories, right? She looked down and nodded. Well, I guess I'll come home when I'm ready. Saying those words out loud gave me away. For a moment, I couldn't hide the sadness in my voice that I had kept in for so long. I saw the guilt on her face when she noticed. She shifted her weight. Really, John? I don't have to go. I don't even want to. You think I want your pity? I said sharply. What are you going to do while I'm away? You mean hurt myself or try to find a way out? Just give up? Don't think so highly of yourself. I looked around the room. If the girls aren't busy, maybe we can go out to eat and watch a movie. Besides that, I already have some ideas for how to keep myself busy while you're having fun. She nodded sadly and looked at me like she was scared she might never see me again. It's okay, I said. Just go, and if you'll be back late, please send me a text so I don't worry. She nodded, then came over to kiss me. I turned and gave her a quick kiss on the cheek, which she returned. After that, she stood up, fixed her clothes, and gave me a tired smile that didn't really reach her eyes. I almost feel like a kid going on a date my dad wouldn't approve of. Forget him. Just remember to send that message and tell old Carl that he should be very scared about what's coming next. She rolled her eyes, trying to make the mood lighter. Even she knew it wouldn't work, but she kept at it. I'll remember, Dad. Then she turned away. I didn't laugh. I don't think she noticed when she left. I put my head in my hands and focused on my breathing for a long time. I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief, like when you wake up from a serious operation that changes you forever. It wasn't easy, but I had made it through. I knew there were more tough moments ahead, but for now, I let myself feel good about getting past this one. When I was ready, I stood up, washed my face in the kitchen sink, and went to see if my daughters wanted some pizza. Thank goodness they were interested. Chapter 2. Saturday morning, Karen woke up earlier than usual. I wasn't really surprised. Normally, during her parties, she would come home around 10 and relax with a drink in the hot tub before going to bed. I thought at first it was her way of asking for some time alone, but now I saw it differently. Taking a warm bath seemed like a nice way to treat myself. It was also a good way to clean up before sleep. This Friday, though, Karen didn't get back until 9:30. She showered quickly and then tiredly fell into bed. She looked worn out and a bit embarrassed. Even in the dim light, I found it hard not to notice her clothes, her hair, and how she walked through the door. My eyes searched for signs that I didn't really want to see but couldn't help looking for. This had become my new habit, very much like hers. It started with a bunch of little questions that popped into my mind without me even noticing. Sometimes it felt like I was struggling to breathe in just a tiny bit of water. Was her outfit wrinkled in front? Was the hair behind her ear messy? Did she not have time to fix it on the way home? Did she walk in a strange way? I couldn't help but think about these things, even though I didn't want to. It made me feel upset that I couldn't stop these thoughts. I really didn't want to know the answers. I didn't even want to think about those questions, but once they started, it was hard to quit. Then she walked into the kitchen that Saturday morning, wearing her robe and slippers. She looked tired, but also determined. She didn't waste any time and got right to making her breakfast, just like I had expected. "You surprised me last night," she said with a breathy voice. She shot me a sharp look to match her words and slammed her breakfast onto the table. If you had just given me a moment to think, even a little moment, I would have said no. I would have stayed home no matter your silly threats, and we could have talked it over. Talk like grown-ups. She shook her head. "You know that, right?" "Of course I do. You fool. But why would I even want to talk to you? I thought about the chance you had to save yourself, but I worried you might ignore it. I still didn't glance up from my paper. That's why I chose not to give you time to think. I was trying to help you. I could feel her annoyed gaze on me, and I found it a bit amusing. "Damn it, John," she shouted, moving her hands around. "Look at me for just 1 minute. Put that paper down and pay attention to me." I set the paper aside and focused on her. "I don't want this to be how our marriage is. I don't want to be away from you, and I don't want you to control how I spend my time." She leaned in closer and spoke softly. "I also don't want to keep hurting you. I can't keep doing this to you. It feels wrong." "Well, that sounds really dramatic." I chuckled lightly. I really don't think you see it, Karen. It's not something you're doing to me. It's already happened. It's in the past. It was like a bullet fired that struck deep and could not be taken back. I leaned in and said, "That might be, but it can't change. Do you understand? Did my words reach you? We can stop talking about this because nothing will change what has already happened. You, my dear wife, broke my trust. You lied and hurt our family, our life together. This will never be part of your story or our marriage. It will never define who you are. It's not what I wanted at all. You made your choice without asking me. Now you're unhappy with what's happened. But you can't change it just because your little choice turned out badly for your life. Please stop this, John. Just stop." I could see tears in her eyes. They seemed so real. "Does our marriage not matter to you? Do you really not care? This feels so unfair. Don't talk to me about what's fair." I slammed my fist on the table, knocking my juice over and spilling it everywhere. I didn't even realize what I was doing. Oh no. I closed my eyes for a moment. I took a deep breath and thought about calm mountain streams. After a little while, I felt a bit better. I continued speaking. "If you can look at your situation clearly, if you take a step back and think about other options, you might start to see where your doubts are coming from. It's not love. It's not hope. It's not worry about your marriage. It's guilt and it's fear. Do you see that? These feelings aren't about clear thinking. They come from something deeper, and they don't show what you truly want." I took a sip of my coffee. "The way things are now works best for you, and that's all I can see. I know you care, but it's not necessary. Not for me. Not anymore. It doesn't help anyone. You haven't really thought about me in a long time. So why change now?" I leaned over and cleaned up the juice that spilled. "I meant what I said last night, Karen. I don't have feelings for you right now, and I'm not sure this way of feeling won't last. Just the idea of being near you makes me uneasy. So on this one very important issue, we disagree. I also think I can't be this close to you without feeling angry. I'm not willing to test that. I meant what I said when I told you I love you, and I don't plan on leaving you. Sure, my feelings might change over time, just like yours could change too. Right now, the only way I can see myself leaving is if you use your relationship with someone else to hurt me. If you start showing you love that person, or if you try to end things with them and push me to be with you when I don't want to. John, I really want you to be happy," I said loudly. "Can we both agree that this is the best way to make that happen?" "No, I wish it wasn't true," she said as she swallowed hard. "I get that you don't want to think that way." I raised my hands, took a deep breath, and tried a different approach. "Do you see how happy you have been the last few months, Karen?" There was silence. "Yes, I remember." I waved my hand and smiled, feeling more relaxed. I laughed at silly jokes and listened to the girls share stories about their day. "You were happier and more caring than I've ever seen you before. I'm not making that up. When you start to feel bad about having such a good time away, you show how much you really care. Maybe if you look at it this way, it could stay true forever. The girls will gain from it. And maybe you'll give me some space. Come on. Do something for someone else for a change." "Karen?" "John?" she stuttered. I didn't realize. Of course you didn't realize. You were focused on other things." She tilted her head. "I wasn't trying to point that out harshly. I promise I didn't mean to. It's just that when I was with him, I missed you. I missed all of you. I mean my family. It hit me hard." She covered her mouth with her hand, trying not to cry. "I know. I took a bite of my food, but that was 3 weeks ago when his mom got sick. He had to fly out to see her, and you two couldn't see each other for 4 or 5 days. I shook my head and smiled a little unsure. "You've really changed, haven't you? I haven't seen you this upset since that tough time during your second pregnancy." I stopped to poke at my food with my fork, trying to find the right words. "I didn't eat anything, though, and I honestly don't think I've ever seen you this upset before. It's like we took the weight of your anger for something we couldn't even give you. That doesn't feel fair at all." Now she was crying loudly. I didn't mean to hurt her. Good. Maybe breaking this silence will help her find her way back. And don't let her rethink her choices. The truth is, you used to be happier than I can remember. That happiness spread through our home. It made things easier for me and the kids, too. Your joy brought light to our lives. So why would any of us want that to fade away? "I want to share that happiness with you," she said firmly. "Wesley, but we don't really have a choice in this, do we? You're happy with me? It's just that what you're doing with him shows otherwise. I'm so scared." She wiped her nose with her sleeve. "I'm scared you will leave me," she said. "You know I won't," I replied. She shook her head. "But why aren't you scared? If we were apart, if you did that to me, I would be." "I would too. It's hard." I thought maybe it was time to be honest with her, at least about this. She had been so patient with all my little lies. So I took a deep breath and said, "I'm really scared, Karen. Do you want to know why?" She nodded. "I'm scared because I feel so alone." "Do you know what that feels like?" I asked. "No, I guess you don't." I paused for a long time, putting my fork down. I thought I had everything going for me. I had chances, you know. I looked away. Now I see that I have almost nothing to hold on to, and it worries me that I can't keep what I do have. The truth is, you aren't part of that list. Maybe she already understood that because she suddenly ran out of the room crying. I just finished another task and put the dirty dishes in the sink. Then I went outside to do some work on the lawn. When I came back in a few hours later, I wiped the sweat off my face with my sleeve, looking forward to a cool shower. The envelope's contents were spread out on our bed. I had been waiting for this moment. I left it there on purpose, knowing her curiosity would make her want to see what I knew about her unfaithfulness. The notes, the pictures, the CDs and DVDs, everything was right there for her to find. Now she knew, and she was still in the bathroom with the shower running. The girls had gone to a friend's house, so I didn't have to worry about them seeing the things laid out on my bed. I went to make myself a fresh cup of coffee and left everything as it was. About 25 minutes later, she came out wearing sweatpants and a tank top, looking unsure of herself. Ever since she decided to end our marriage, she seemed more sure of herself. Normally, this might have been something to admire, but it made me feel uncomfortable knowing why she felt that way. Sometimes her confidence felt more like being proud, and when that happened, it was hard to be around her. But not for the first time, I noticed how pretty she was looking. I watched her as if I were looking at a painting, seeing beauty but feeling nothing about it. I just knew she was there. It amazed me. In the last few months, she seemed to have gained years back. While I felt like I had aged a lot, those years she gained from being with someone else had taken a toll on me. I could see how much I had changed during that time. I just didn't want to care anymore. She spoke hesitantly, looking unhappy and not making eye contact. Her eyes were red, and she rubbed them as she walked into the room. I noticed the report on the table and gave her a cup of coffee, asking her to sit down. She nodded. "I didn't know that. I know you said you knew everything," but she took a sip of her coffee. "If knowing everything is why I stayed, then I'm glad. If all I had was some blurry pictures of you with him, I think I would have reacted differently. Things would have been worse for both of us. Also, knowing everything made me see that you still cared about us, even if it seemed like the other investors were pulling away. To be honest, it felt hard to see everything laid out like that." She took another sip of her coffee. "It was tough to think about how you knew everything we shared, all the moments we had together and everything I told him." She looked up. "You knew about the car?" I nodded. She shook her head, surprised. "And you didn't even try to stop me. You let me trade in our family van where we made so many memories, and you knew why I wanted that SUV from the start." "Oh no, I didn't. You can't blame me for that. At that time, I didn't know. In fact, the fact that you wanted that car, that very car, made me wonder. You think I didn't notice? It was just like Carl's. You should have seen your face when you recognized it in the parking lot." I clenched my jaw tightly, like a kid waiting for Christmas. She made a face like a baby. "That seems to be how I feel these days." "No, happy? Happy is how you seem these days. Maybe that's all that matters. The rest?" I waved my hand as if to brush it away. She looked at me doubtfully. "You can't expect me to believe that you're not hurting inside, John. I can see it on your face." "That's odd, Karen, because you didn't see it before. In fact, you hardly noticed me at all." "Okay, I'm feeling hurt." I shrugged. "Would it hurt less if I left or if you had gone away? If you stopped seeing him, stopped being happy, and we had to go through trying to fix our love life when you're not interested and I can't handle it? Would that make my pain go away?" I shook my head. "I have a wife I truly love and 2 wonderful kids who mean everything to me now. They are happier than I have ever seen them. I can deal with the pain if that's what it takes. You will never take my children from me, I promise you that. I will say and do whatever I need to make sure that doesn't happen. I don't like being the one to hurt you. That's rich. You do a lot of things, okay? But only one thing hurts me. I feel pain like I've never felt before, and it's growing with every moment. I smiled. Don't make it worse than it has to be. Sometimes I wish you would just end my pain. Isn't that sad? Sometimes I feel so down that I wish I could just go away. She didn't calm down at all. I don't get it. How can you accept a life like this? Seriously? I thought I was ready to live like that, Karen. I've felt that way for a while now, but how can you just leave it like this? How can you not want to fight for something better? I leaned closer, feeling impatient. This talk seemed less important than what I had planned, and I wanted to wrap it up. Do you still care about me? I asked softly. Of course, she replied, like I expected. Then that's it, I said with a shrug. That's how it is, okay? She pushed her chair back and ran to me, hugging me tightly and resting her head on my chest. I held her like that for a while, letting her cry and trying not to just let her go. After a few moments, I gently pulled back and waited for her to gather herself. So what do we do now? She asked sadly. We keep on doing what we've always done. That's just how it is. It feels like everything has changed around us. But that's okay. As long as we're safe here, it doesn't really bother us. She looked up at me and asked, What about today? What are we going to do today? She looked a little nervous as she shifted her weight. Did you have any plans? I frowned a bit. There was something in the way she moved that showed me more than she wanted. Well, I said slowly, picking my words carefully. I have a new book. I'm looking forward to a day when I can relax and read it at home. She looked happy to hear that. You don't want to go out or do something else? I'm not sure, I admitted. I don't feel like doing anything special right now. I felt annoyed. If you need to ask what to do, at least be brave about it. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. Just a quiet day with my book sounds nice. Then I turned back to the window, trying to seem relaxed even though it took every bit of effort. The kids won't be home until after dinner. It was a nice, calm day, just how I liked it. Suddenly, I heard some noise behind me. She touched my arm and said, Promise me you'll be here when I come back. You know I will, I replied, but she wanted to hear me say it. She whispered softly, asking again. I didn't respond. I just kept looking out the window at the quiet, familiar view. After a bit, my curiosity got the best of me, so I turned around. She was gone. Honestly, that was a relief. A few minutes later, she came out of the bedroom. She was wearing comfy pants and a top, and she had a bag with her. When she noticed me watching her, she picked up the bag and said, I realized it was silly to hide this in the car. I shrugged because I didn't really care. I knew she had a special bag for secret plans, and I wondered what was inside. For a moment, we just looked at each other. I was sitting in a chair with a book I wasn't going to read, and she stood there with her duffel bag looking a bit anxious. My stomach twisted with worry. She looked a bit embarrassed and unsure about what to do for a moment. Then she smiled and shyly said she wanted to continue her silly joke from the night before. I won't be too late, Daddy. She tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. It was such a simple action, yet it was so lovely. I looked away. Chapter 13. That Friday, the Baileys were hosting one of their usual neighborhood gatherings. I say neighbors, but it was really a mix of families from the area who all went to the same elementary school. You know how it is. The gatherings usually didn't start with the men or the kids, but we still had a great time. We had always joined events like this, but this one felt different. I knew Carl would be there. He didn't quite fit in with the couples, but he was Tom Bailey's drinking buddy and never turned down a party invite, if he had a choice. I started to wonder if he used those parties to win over the wives of his married friends. I had tried to stay away from him since I learned what he was like, and it seemed he was avoiding me too. Still, I knew that being around other people could be nice, and the kids would enjoy themselves. So while I thought about making up an excuse like saying I was sick or had an emergency to skip the party, I really didn't want him to think he could push me away that easily. In the end, I decided to find the courage to go. Showing up at the party felt like a way to stand my ground. Karen was clearly excited. Maybe she saw it as a chance for us to connect more as a couple, a way to convince herself that she could have everything she wanted, or maybe just an opportunity to spend some secret time with her boyfriend. I couldn't be sure. I wasn't sure I really cared, but when we first got there, she stayed close to me. It seemed like she was trying to send some kind of message, either to me or someone else. I gave her a few curious looks, but she pretended not to see them. All right, act innocent. But the way she kept her hands and eyes on me made me think it was on purpose. The hosts always made sure there was plenty of drinks at their events. As the night went on, a mix of nerves and excitement seemed to get to Karen. She drank more than usual and faster, too. It really showed. She became relaxed, playful, and much less anxious than when we first arrived. By the time the sun started to set, she moved away from me to join others. Once she did that, I don't think she looked back at me even once. So it seemed like the idea of a reunion faded away. Soon I noticed that she and Carl were together in the same group of people. It didn't happen very often, but enough times that I became sure it was on purpose. They wanted it to seem like a coincidence, but it really wasn't. They never did anything that would catch the attention of those who didn't know, but for those who did, it was hard to miss how their eyes sparkled when they looked at each other. I noticed how Karen laughed a bit too loudly at Carl's jokes, especially when she thought no one else was watching. As the night went on, the drinks were flowing, and so were the conversations. Whenever things got really fun or there was a lot of laughter, Carl would put his hand on Karen's shoulder or she would touch his arm. It wasn't obvious enough for others to see, but it touched my heart. I felt a strange mix of emotions. I couldn't believe she was doing this in front of everyone. What was she thinking? Did she care about how this looked to others? I thought I could hide my feelings from her and that she would understand a little bit of what I was going through. I was wrong. I watched as the group around them split up, leaving just the two of them for a little while. They were talking quietly. Carl was leaning in slightly, and Karen was laughing softly. Then Karen did something that really shocked me. She looked around the party, checking out her friends with a smile that seemed proud. Then she laughed. That's when I understood what they were really doing. They were playing a game with us. They must have planned it beforehand, probably before I saw her, and she clearly didn't think to stop it. I could imagine how excited they were. Let's see how far we can go by acting like a couple right in front of everyone so no one will suspect anything. That's why Karen stayed close to me and kept touching me. It was a signal to her friend that it wasn't the right time to start their game. It also helped to calm me so I wouldn't notice what prank she was planning later. Being near me was part of her plan for the game. I leaned on the railing, suddenly feeling very tired. My wife had turned me into a tool for a silly game with her friend in front of our close friends. She used those friends to play this game too. We were all just toys for them to play with. I looked around the party. These were people who had been good to us over the years, much better than Carl. I wondered, why would anyone want to treat them like this? Had Karen really changed so much in just 6 months that she thought this was okay? What happened to her sense of right and wrong? I felt foolish for asking that. I turned to see where Karen and Carl were standing. They were already gone. I frowned and looked around the party, hoping to see them. When that didn't happen, I walked around a bit, thinking I might find them with someone new, but I still didn't see them. I moved through the area again, trying not to seem too eager in my search. A few times I had to politely turn down people who wanted to chat. I checked the backyard again before going inside, pretending I needed to use the bathroom, but there was nothing happening there either. As I walked past the living room to head back outside, I noticed them through the big windows. They were partly hidden by the plants in Bailey's lawn. Karen was leaning against a tree, and Carl was close by, with one hand resting on the tree above her. They were talking, but it seemed like he was doing most of the talking, while she listened closely to everything he said. I noticed his expression change, and he leaned in a bit closer. As I watched them, they shared a long, gentle kiss. It was a sweet and scary moment. When they finally pulled away, she said something to him, and he nodded. Even with everything else happening, I could hear the words they exchanged when they were close. The way they connected showed deep feelings, and seeing this hurt me more than anything else. People talk about lovers becoming one, but they don't mean just fun. They speak about the kind of heartfelt bond I just saw. I felt my stomach turn, and I rushed to the bathroom to be sick. I was overwhelmed by strong feelings. How could they hurt me like this after all those years? No matter what else had happened, I realized I still had feelings for Karen. Once that love felt like a blessing. Now it felt like a never-ending punishment for mistakes I didn't understand. But even that didn't fully explain my intense reaction. The kiss surprised me like a sudden shock. It felt like a fresh betrayal. It was like I was losing her all over again. I didn't notice my thoughts were interrupted when I got sick again. There was a knock on the door. Tom Bailey's deep voice called out, "Is everything okay in there?" I jumped. Great. Just what I needed. Friends worrying. "I'm fine," I lied. "Almost done." I could hear quiet voices outside the door. "Is that John?" a woman asked. "Does anyone know? I think it's John," she insisted. Brad Mullins stood up. "Did I hear someone was sick in there?" "Alice thought it was John," Tom said. "He has a strange voice. Where's Karen?" Alice asked, looking anxious. "Someone go get Karen. He's been with us all night." "Oh no, it must be Albert Burke. I didn't realize he had been drinking so much. Maybe it's the flu." "It's not really flu season for him," Alice said. "He definitely didn't drink that much," Albert replied. Then, at that moment, Carl's cheerful voice rang out in the schoolyard. "Some people just can't handle their drinks," he said with a laugh. I quickly shouted back, "I'm fine! I'm coming out!" After standing up and using the toilet, I walked over to the sink and splashed my face with water. The chatter outside faded for a moment until I heard a soft knock on the door. It was hesitant, like it wasn't sure if it should come in. "John? Are you okay in there?" Karen's worried voice called out. I took a deep breath to calm myself and pushed away the frustration that rose inside me. When I opened the door and looked straight at her, I said firmly, "Me and the girls are leaving, right now. If you don't want to come, that's fine. You can ask your boyfriend for a ride. I really don't care." Karen's eyes grew wide, and I noticed the color drain from her face. I knew she must have been thinking a lot at that moment. I hadn't taken a moment to check if we were alone before I confronted her about her boyfriend. I could have easily exposed her secret. But don't expect me to say sorry. She could have done the same thing with the silly game she was playing. Clearly someone must have noticed what happened, and now the rumors are spreading. So I guess she has some thinking to do now, right? She must have figured out that something set me off. She knew I usually kept my cool. I hadn't had much to drink that night, and she was aware of my anger when it flared up. It struck me as odd that she didn't ask what was wrong or pretend to care. I guess she didn't want to hear what I had to say. "Let me get my bag," she said, a bit flustered. "I'll be right back. Don't leave without me." Then she hurried back toward the party. After she left, the house felt very quiet. I guess everyone had gone to give me some space while I got over my drinking. I searched my pockets for my car keys and walked into the living room, trying to calm down. Looking out the patio door, I saw Karen grab her purse from the table. She quickly said goodbye to the people she had just been joking with. Carl walked over, trying to seem relaxed, but not quite managing it. He said something to her as she walked by. They had a brief talk, and I could see Carl looked a bit worried, while Karen seemed full of energy. She talked with excitement, her face getting redder and her eyes wide. Her hands moved around a lot as she spoke. If I didn't know better, I would think I was watching a little fight between them. Finally, Carl stepped closer to her and whispered something. Her shoulders went up, almost to her ears, and she looked around the party, checking if anyone else noticed what was happening. No one seemed to see the obvious. She glanced at Carl again, stepped back, and he said something else to her that made her shake her head. He kept talking. She shook her head once more. He moved closer, looking at her with sad eyes, and spoke again. She paused, gave a small nod, and turned to leave. I watched him look at her, noting the smirk that appeared as soon as she walked away, and I felt my anger grow. The drive home was quiet. Karen stared out the window, her face showing little emotion. I wondered what was on her mind. Was she feeling embarrassed about what happened? Worried she might have gone too far? Upset with me for interrupting her fun? She was upset with Carl for making her join a game she didn't enjoy. Or maybe she was just happy to have had some fun. She didn't seem to care about anything else. As far as I could tell, she wasn't thinking about me at all, and maybe that didn't bother me. When we got home, the kids dashed downstairs to play video games, and Karen grabbed a half-empty bottle of Chardonnay from the refrigerator as she moved to the cupboard. She looked at me for a moment, probably deciding if she should pour me a glass, but I went straight to the bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the shower, let the water warm up, and then stepped in, standing there without a thought. I didn't think, feel, or imagine anything. I just let the water flow over me, wishing it could take away my worries one day. I let the water wash over me and then disappear down the drain, thinking I wouldn't worry again. The next day, Karen said she was sorry. It was a short and vague apology, but it was clear she didn't want to explain more. She didn't want to admit to what I had seen or understood. This was classic behavior for someone who was being unfaithful. She seemed to ignore how wrong her actions were, even as she tried to comfort herself with her apology. After a few minutes of forced small talk and uncomfortable silence, she cautiously suggested that we might all feel better after our trip to the zoo tomorrow. Tomorrow? I tilted my head, pretending to be surprised. We're not going tomorrow. Of course we are. You've mixed up your days, Karen. Today is Saturday. We're going today. No. She stretched slowly, eyeing me with annoyance. We're going on Sunday. We talked about it. I shook my head and pretended to be desperate. What are you talking about? We planned the zoo for Saturday, Karen. Today. We've talked about it many times, don't you remember? She blinked and looked around like she was trying to figure something out. She seemed so nervous and lost that I nearly smiled. What's wrong? Is it tough to balance two lives when you can't control one? She was right, though. We had decided on Sunday for the trip earlier that week. But the more I thought about what happened at the party, especially that kiss, the less I wanted to be near her. So I talked to the girls when I put them to bed the night before. I told them if they were good, we could go to the zoo a day early. Now Karen looked serious. You're mistaken, she said firmly. I'm pretty sure we said Sunday. I studied her for a moment, letting my annoyance at her recent actions show on my face. I wanted her to think I was upset about her forgetfulness. Then I called out to the girls in the living room, Hey girls, what are we doing today? We're going to the zoo, they both answered happily at the same time. I turned to Karen with a tired expression. See? It's today. Even the girls know that. So let's stop playing around. I don't get why it matters. It's just a one-day difference. It's not a big deal, right? She looked a bit embarrassed and then stretched. I actually have plans for today, she said. I tried to look surprised. Wow, really? I saw you talking about it at our friend's party. Did you think no one noticed? But I didn't raise my eyebrows. I pretended to be disappointed. Truthfully, I was relieved. Even though I had seen that little talk between her and Carl, and I thought they had made some plans, I knew there was still a chance I could be wrong. For all I knew, those plans could have been for Monday or for something they were doing next weekend, or even a month from now. All I could be sure of was that they were definitely making plans. I hoped it would happen soon. From what I could see through the window, I imagined it would go something like this. Are we still on for tomorrow? I don't know, Carl. He's really mad. Maybe I should just stay away. Don't do that. He said it was okay. There was hesitation, maybe some guilt. I shouldn't. She looked at him with big, sad eyes. You're hurting my feelings. A pause followed. Okay, I'll be there. And then she left. It might not have been the exact words, but I knew what I saw. They made a promise, and I was really hoping she would keep it. The last thing I wanted was to spend the day with her, talking and sharing my life. I didn't want to be near her, and if that meant she had to be with him, then so be it. She moved her weight from one foot to the other. She was still waiting for a response and probably thought I would be angry. Maybe it was best to just let it go. I didn't want to pretend to be upset with her. Plans? I shook my head and said, You must be joking, Karen. Last night's terrible games weren't enough for you two. Can't you spend just one day with your family before heading off again? She responded, sounding annoyed. This was your idea. I'm just doing what you wanted. So he was pushing this on her. It wasn't her choice, but sounded a lot like something Carl would say. Anyway, she said with a sigh, it's just one day. The girls will understand. They won't have to, I shot back. We are going to the zoo with or without you. Don't you dare, she yelled. They are my kids too. You're not going to start this. You're right, I cut in. I'm not starting anything. I'm not changing the plans. I'm not going to skip family time. I won't start living up to your expectations. She looked at me with wide eyes. Listen, if you don't like the idea that I jumped up, and she took a step back, breathing heavily. Honestly, I think she stopped talking because she was shocked before I even moved. At least I give her that. She might not have shown me much respect, but that still made her a little embarrassed. For a moment, we just stared at each other, both of us angry and unsure of what to do next. Then pride took over. A smirk formed on her lips, and she said, "Fine, do it your way. You want to spend the day acting like a mom? That's okay with me. The girls and I will just have fun after I pick them up from school tomorrow." She turned halfway, giving me a confident look over her shoulder. "Just not with you." And then she walked away. I shook my head, trying not to feel hurt. This is what I wanted, right? For her to go away so I could have some peace and quiet? Maybe even forget my problems for a bit and enjoy time with my kids. So why did winning feel just as empty and heavy as losing? I went inside and told the girls that Mom couldn't take us to the zoo, but we could go as soon as they got dressed and brushed their teeth. That wouldn't change anything for them. They didn't react much. They only pretended to be upset with Mom for a moment and then dashed off to get ready. I couldn't help but smile a little. Such simple wishes. I sat down to read the newspaper while I waited. I hadn't seen or heard anything about Karen during this time. For all I knew, she had packed her things and left the house right after our argument. The thought that she might have already gone and that I wouldn't have to watch her leave gave me a tired sense of relief. At least I wouldn't have to hear that annoying joke about my dad again. I could hear water running in the bathroom, which meant the girls were almost done brushing their teeth. I got up and gathered everything I needed for our trip to the zoo. Just as I finished my task, the girls burst into the kitchen, full of energy and happiness. For a moment, I enjoyed their bright and simple joy. "Are you two ready to go?" I asked. "Are we?" one of them replied. "Yes, you promised us. And guess what?" Susie jumped in, smiling widely. "Mommy's coming too." Before I could tell them that Mommy couldn't actually go with us, Karen shuffled into the room. She had an apologetic look and was wearing an outfit that seemed right for the zoo. "Oh," I said, shaking my head and looking away. I felt a mix of disappointment and confusion. I wasn't sure how I felt anymore. "Hi," she said awkwardly. "You decided to join us?" It wasn't really a question. "It's..." She leaned in close and looked around to make sure the girls couldn't hear. "Okay," she whispered. I shrugged. There wasn't much I could do about it now. They had already made their choice. She shivered a bit. "I guess I can be really difficult sometimes, can't I? More than you know." I shrugged again, unsure of what to do. My plans had fallen apart, and now I had to spend the day with her. There was no way we could go back, with the kids happily bouncing around us. Karen had decided to stay, and there was nothing I could change about that. So why didn't I feel worse? "Thanks a lot, Carl. You couldn't help me this time, could you?" I sighed as the girls began to fidget. "There's no point in waiting. Let's go." The day turned out to be nicer than I expected. I had thought the growing distance between Karen and me would make everything feel heavy, but surprisingly, it was the opposite. The happiness of our time together seemed to push away the dark thoughts for a little while. Yes, the strong connection that used to hold us together was gone, but it had been part of us for so many years. It was easy to pretend it was still there. So, for a few wonderful hours, my family felt complete again. The girls played a big role in this. They laughed and ran around, feeling safe knowing their parents were there for them. What they didn't know was that the idea of their parents being a happy couple was over. They thought everything was as it should be, and with their joyful energy, it felt like they were right for a short time. A simpler way opened up between Karen and me. At first, it was just quiet. I wanted to keep it this way, but of course that became impossible. You really can't take your kids into the excitement of freedom and wide open spaces without talking a bit with your partner. So I skipped even a little chat, and that caused some trouble. When I asked where we should go next time, it reminded us of how much we enjoyed the rainforest exhibit last year. Do you remember? That thought made us smile and brought back nice memories, which led to more talks. Maybe you felt this way before. When you have a lot of shared moments, it's easy to find joy in remembering them. Soon you find yourselves discussing the safest and warmest topic of all, the times when your kids were happy. Strangely enough, I think we got along better on this trip than we have for a long time, even if the reasons weren't great. I could see it impacted Karen, too. Based on her bright cheeks and constant smile, I felt the same way she did. It's what happens when you start a new relationship. It's a little strange, maybe even hard to explain, but it's real. For a few hours, everything felt exciting and fresh. By the time we all got into the van at sunset, I was having such a great time that I forgot all about what happened with Karen. For a while, I didn't think about her being unfaithful at all. Can you think of a better gift than one that helps you forget hurtful things? They say the little things matter. I can't say for sure, but those little things can sneak up on you. Right when we were about 10 minutes away from the zoo, driving home on the highway, a simple sound pulled me back to reality. Truth is, it broke the joyful day I was having. It was just Karen's phone vibrating in her purse. It could have been just another phone call if she had bothered to check or answer it. Instead, she covered her purse with her coat to block out the noise and stared out the window until it stopped ringing. That told me everything I needed to know. Just like that, the happiness we had felt disappeared. The joy of the moment was gone. But it was more than that. I suddenly felt as sad and as tired as I had ever been. It was like being a prisoner who thinks he is about to be free, only to be pushed into a room for something unpleasant. I focused on the road ahead and tried not to think too much. I wished this day had never happened so I could escape how I felt right then. Karen and the kids kept smiling, laughing, and talking about everything we had done that day. I joined in a little to keep up the front, but my heart was no longer convinced. When we arrived at the house and shut the garage door, I stayed still while everyone else got out of the car. "Aren't you coming?" Karen asked when I didn't move. I quietly said, "I need a minute," still staring straight ahead as if I was focused on the road. "Is something wrong?" she asked, frowning. "No." I fell silent. She didn't move either. "Are you sure?" she pressed. "I'm just tired," I replied firmly. "Please." She took a deep breath and reached out to touch my hand. "Just 1 minute," I insisted. "Can I have 1 little minute before I go in?" She seemed to hesitate, opened her mouth like she wanted to say more, then sighed and went inside with the others. I wasn't sure what was going on with me. Maybe I was weighed down by feelings I had kept inside for too long. Maybe I just crossed a line I didn't mean to. Or maybe I was just feeling really sad. I can't say for sure. But as soon as the door to the house closed, I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and cried hard, like a child. It was like nothing I had ever felt before. I wasn't someone who cried, not even as a baby. But now I was crying like parents do when they miss their child. I cried as if I was the last person at a funeral. It felt like it would never stop. All I wanted was to take a breath and feel in control again. But every sob felt like it was being pulled from somewhere deep inside me. When the tears finally started to ease up, I almost laughed in relief. I didn't think it would ever end. Sitting up, I placed my hand on my chest and focused on taking calm, deep breaths until I felt I was ready to go back inside. I planned to stop by the bathroom, wash my face, and hope no one would notice. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw some movement. No. I turned around. Our eyes met. She was standing just a few feet away with her hand over her mouth. Big tears were flowing down both of her cheeks. Guilt, sadness, and hurt showed on her face. Each of these feelings made me feel sick. Then she turned and ran back inside the house. Damn it! Just damn it! I hit my fist on the car's steering wheel looking for something else to punch. I found nothing, so I hit the wheel again. Damn it, damn it, damn it, I just wanted one thing. That's all I asked for. One small thing I could keep for myself. One little thing just for me. Sure, she didn't leave that night. But after that, we never talked again. I acted like I was watching TV, and she acted like she didn't see me watching her. After the girls were in bed, she went out on the porch, took out her phone, and talked for over an hour. Her face looked tight, and her eyes were down. "Hi," she said quietly on a Sunday morning. "Did you sleep well?" "Not really. Not at all." "I slept well," she said. She took a sip of her coffee. "Thanks for last night. I had a good time." She looked at me. "I'm really sorry it ended like that. I feel the same way." There was a long silence. "John," she said. "Yes?" "Why are you doing this to yourself?" "Just try to stay calm. We've talked about this before." "I know, but I can't help feeling there must be a better way for us." I looked at her sharply and she went quiet. I stood up, poured out the rest of my cereal, and left the room. For the next few hours, I did chores and surfed the internet. Karen didn't try to talk to me again, and for a bit, I thought she understood. Then, a little after lunch, she took the girls to a friend's house. When she came back, she went straight to the bedroom. I didn't wait long. I could hear the shower running. It would keep her busy for a while. I didn't want her around right now. So why did these thoughts keep coming back? Why did I feel so uneasy inside, like something was pulling me in different directions? I tried to push that feeling away and focused on something else because that usually helped. But things were worse than I thought. About half an hour later, my office door swung open and there she was. The others were gone. She spoke softly, knowing just how good she looked and how I would react. "I thought you might want to spend some time together," she said. I warned myself not to give in. "Karen, don't do this. It won't fix anything. It will only make things harder." She stepped closer. "I'm not trying to fix anything. I just wanted to share something." I cut her off. "Stop! Don't come any closer. Not now. And definitely not wearing that." Her expression changed, but she kept moving forward. "You know I can make you happy." I slammed my hands on the table and jumped to my feet. I said, "Stop." This time she really did stop, and it seemed like some of her confidence slipped away. "Please, John," she begged. I wanted to give the vulnerable woman a chance, unlike the confident person I had seen before. "I just want you by my side. I really do. I've missed it more than you know." I shot her a look that showed exactly what I thought about her words. "Tell me something," I replied sharply. "Who made you wear those clothes? Because I don't remember you wearing them for me before. Never." She flinched at my words. "But I like them." "I thought you liked them too," she said softly. I stood in the doorway, turned, looked at her, and shook my head. She looked embarrassed, maybe even a little ashamed. "Welcome to the club," I thought. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I wouldn't get close to you for anything," I said, spitting on the floor for emphasis. "You see, I promised to be faithful to my wife, to share my life only with her. I made a promise to myself, and I plan to keep it. It matters to me." I looked at her with irritation. She wasn't present. I closed the door hard behind me. The next time I saw Karen, she was in sweatpants, sitting in a chair and flipping through the TV channels. She didn't look at me as I walked past. I noticed her jaw tighten a bit, but I shouldn't have seen that. That's fine with me. For the next 2 weeks, she went back to the way she used to live with family, like she did at the zoo. She kept glancing my way, checking if I was starting to warm up to her again. She also didn't mention wanting to spend time with Carl, which I thought was part of her plan. I knew she had to be seeing him. I just didn't want to think about it. I wasn't sure how she was managing it. On Thursday of the second week, I decided to find out. After lunch, I called her office and asked for her. "Who is calling?" a voice asked. I didn't often reach out to her at work. I usually just texted her if I wanted to talk. "It's her husband," I replied. There was a pause on the line. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "I'm sorry, sir, but Mrs. Sanders is out of town," the voice said. "Mrs. Sanders? So you don't believe I'm her husband? Maybe because she told you someone else was who she would be with. I wasn't going to lie for her." "Okay, thanks. I'll talk to her when she gets back, wherever she is." I hung up the phone with a frustrated laugh. I thought about what I just learned. I already knew she had taken some of her vacation days to sneak around behind my back. Now it seemed she was back to her old ways, seeing someone else while trying to fix things with me, but that's not how it works. I knew I had to teach her a lesson. I kept it quiet and low-key. That weekend, I told the whole family. Guess what? I announced it at dinner. We're all going to Disney World. The girls went wild, squealing and asking a bunch of funny questions. I tried my best to answer them, but Karen looked at me with a mix of doubt, shock, and anger. "Disneyland," she finally said quietly. Then she leaned closer and frowned. "We can't afford that, John. Our money situation is tight." She said the last part a bit too strongly. I knew what she really meant. I just shrugged my shoulders. "Yes, it would cost us, but everything is already booked. I can tell you we won't be able to go again if that's what you're worried about. So we'll just have to enjoy this trip." I winked at the girls and shared all the exciting details. It's going to be a big adventure. We were leaving town for a whole week, which meant we were spending most of the savings we had worked hard for over the past 7 or 8 years. It was the kind of mistake that would make any financial planner very worried. I even decided to rent an apartment instead of just getting a hotel room. I wanted us to have a place where we could feel at home and have everything we need for our daily lives. Karen was shocked when I finished. "I can't believe you spent all our money without asking me first," she said softly. "Since when did we start talking to each other before making big decisions about our life together?" I smiled and took a bite of my food. "I think this is the last year our girls will enjoy this. Soon it won't feel special anymore. We need to do this now, and we should spend time with family, too." When I mentioned family, she looked worried. "But that's so much money. We'll be okay as long as we don't get any surprise hospital bills. If our cars keep working and we don't have to take time off without pay at work?" She looked even more worried. "John, I'm not sure I have enough time off for something like that." I acted surprised. She turned red and looked down at the table. I may have used up most of it, to be honest. I put my fork down. "You've been with the company a long time, Karen. You must have accumulated a lot of vacation time over the years." Her face turned even redder. "Well, I've actually used it all. Or I've used enough that it's a problem now. On top of that, I'm falling behind on some big projects because I've missed so much work recently. You can see how I feel by looking at my face." She didn't look up. She just nodded a little. I thought about what she said for a moment, then stood up. "So much for being honest about when you see him," I said angrily. "I really thought for a while that you wanted to be part of this family again, Karen. I guess there just can't be enough of us, can there?" Then I walked out of the room. She didn't try to follow me. Sorry. I sat down in the living room and picked up my book. I couldn't help but smile to myself. Mission accomplished. I get to enjoy a whole week at Disneyland with my girls and a whole week away from my wife. And the best part is that it's all because of her. A few days later, Karen's mom came to visit me. I'm not sure if she noticed the space between us. If she did, she might have been happy about it. Her mom never liked me. In fact, I think she probably hated me. She had a way of showing it without saying anything. I'd love to tell you I understood why, but she was very religious, and I didn't believe in anything. So everything I said or did didn't matter to her. I would never want to be the bad guy. I thought about what she would think if she found out her perfect daughter was causing me trouble. Would she find it funny? Or would she be too shocked to care about how I felt? Honestly, I think it would depend on who was there to see her reaction. At first, she noticed that I looked thinner. Even guys have to get new clothes if they lose weight. John, just thinking about it made her roll her eyes. Anyway, you should know that not everyone looks better when they lose weight. I'm not trying to lose weight. I told her I just wasn't feeling hungry. Well, try to eat more before you have to buy a new belt. She smiled at me in a way that felt a little too sweet. I wasn't sure that would be a good thing. Karen quietly started making my favorite meal that night and bit her lip as she watched me not eat. "John," she said gently at one point, glancing at the girls and choosing her words with care. "It's hard enough to get them to eat." And then there was Dad not showing good behavior. I looked at her for a long time. A lot of answers rushed into my head, but she was right. I sighed and tapped my fork. "I'm not feeling well. I think I'll go to bed early. This should have made her feel a bit better. At least I wouldn't be a bad example anymore." But she just huffed in annoyance as I slowly left the room and went to my bedroom. In the following weeks, Karen tried many times to talk to me about going to Disney. Really? She even tried to change my mind. There was no other reason for the talks. At first, she felt sorry and apologized for using up all her vacation days. But as I kept turning her down, she got more and more upset and frustrated. In the last few days before we left, she became very mean, tossing her book at me and making sly comments about how at least she didn't need to go to Disneyland to have fun. I decided to ignore her for some reason, which was new for me since her affair started, and her words didn't seem to bother me anymore. It didn't take her long to notice this change. For reasons I still don't quite get, she reacted with anger. I remember clearly when she made a mocking remark about spending the week with Carl. My silence seemed to show her that it didn't hurt me to hear about it anymore. Suddenly, she fell completely quiet. I looked at her and she stared at me like a child who had just been scolded. Then, just as fast, she ran out of the room. I shook my head and went back to reading my magazine. I wasn't going to try to understand her strange behavior anymore. I knew it wouldn't help. But for some reason, the thought kept me awake and made it hard to focus on the article I was reading. After a while, I set it down and did something I wasn't proud of. I walked over to the cabinet above the stove, the one only I could reach, and took out my pack of cigarettes. I had left them there 2 years ago when I finally quit smoking. I felt better knowing they were there, even though I had never wanted to smoke again until that moment. I stood on the back porch when she saw me. "When did you start doing that again?" she asked. I took a puff and coughed. "It's not as good as I remember," I said, but I took another puff anyway. She was quiet for a moment. "Did you need something?" I asked. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I was stuck. Honestly, I'm not even sure what I've become, but I know I can't go on like this. I shrugged. "You know, I finally see why you are acting like this," she said. "I used to think this was all about me. I thought you couldn't go on without me. Then tonight I got upset with you and you didn't react. I must have hurt you with my words. If the tables were turned, it would have crushed me." "But you," she said, looking surprised, "you just let it roll off your back." That's when I knew I couldn't keep you any longer. That's when I understood you were done with me. I took another puff of my cigarette and tossed it aside. "It's all about the girls, right? You did all this for them." I nodded, and they looked so happy. "You did such a great job looking out for them," she said with a short laugh. "You messed up your life so they could enjoy their childhood a bit longer." I quietly asked, "You're going to take pictures, right? At Disneyland?" She wrapped her arm around my shoulders. They would always remember this trip, creating a special memory. Suddenly, she started crying. "It's the only way I can cope." "Sure, I'll take pictures," I replied. But I didn't say anything else. I didn't hug her. I just let her cry. She was someone else's concern now. "Thank you," she finally said, getting herself together. "Thanks for the pictures." Then she went back inside the house. Disneyland was a big hit. The girls enjoyed every second there. One of the best things about kids is that when they are with friends, they can make waiting in line feel like a fun adventure. I took many pictures and let the girls call their mom each night to share stories about their exciting vacation. I didn't mean to brag about it. Hearing them squeal with joy only added to Karen's sadness, which was just a little extra satisfaction for me. Besides the phone calls, I honestly don't know how Karen spent her time that week. All I know is that she rarely came to my mind, and I can't say how grateful I was for that. Suddenly, I could sleep better at night and enjoy the meals I had during the day. It felt so strong and clear. Honestly, it was like experiencing a huge weight being lifted off me. The last few months were very tough, but I thought I had finally got past it to the point where it wouldn't bother me anymore. Yet, I knew there were some problems with that thinking, especially since I still had no interest in being close to anyone. Or maybe that wasn't completely right. There were many lovely women out in the sunlight, and I could see their beauty and appreciate it from a distance. No matter what good things I did, they couldn't fix the hurt I felt after learning about my wife's betrayal. I met Karen when she was at a great time in her life. I was young and healthy, with a lot of hair on my head. From the moment we met, I gave her everything I had. But it wasn't enough for her. If my best effort wasn't enough for someone who had already given so much to me, what could I offer to anyone else? It sounds silly, but being hurt by someone you love feels like falling from a tree. The more you care for someone, the harder the fall feels, and it takes longer to get your bearings after hitting the ground. If you ever talk to someone who says they just stood up, brushed off the dust, and walked away, remember, maybe their fall wasn't so far. So no, I wasn't fully healed, but I was okay with that. I felt good about how far I had come. My feelings about intimacy were now filled with worry and sadness, so I didn't really want those feelings to come back. To sum it up, we had a wonderful week together before returning home. When we got back, Karen looked a bit sad and quiet. She tried to ask the girls about their trip and smiled and laughed with them, but something felt off. She kept seeing Carl, but she was not as lively as before. She seemed less happy and excited than she had been in the past few months. I noticed this change, but I didn't really think about what it meant. I was just happy that she understood our situation and was trying to find a way to deal with it instead of trying to change things. 3 weeks after we returned, I started to feel a bit anxious. When Karen carefully asked if I wanted to go to the next Bailey gathering, I was surprised. I didn't even know they were planning one. She explained that they called a few days ago and invited us, and then she looked at me with a worried expression. "If you don't want to go." I frowned as I thought about what happened last time we attended an event like this. But then I shook off the worry. Girls like these things, I reminded her, and we both knew that it was a big part of the answer. I'm not going anywhere near it, she promised me. Don't make empty promises like that. They don't mean anything. Still, I couldn't help but hope that maybe this time she really meant it. She fidgeted, moved around a bit, and wrinkled her pillow. After a moment, she turned over and scratched her shoulder in a bothered way. Then she sighed and shifted again. I lay there in the dark, just listening. It was a game I had played for a long time. I even looked forward to the peaceful quiet that nighttime brought. It was new for her, and I knew it wasn't easy for her. Tom Bailey must be doing well at his job. They fixed up the kitchen and got new furniture for the deck. The sun was just beginning to set. I was starting to enjoy my drink. It was a nice moment when she leaned in and softly spoke to me. Please stop looking at them. I nodded and turned my eyes to the couple we were with, but I didn't say anything else. Still, I couldn't help glancing at him a few more times, wanting to see what he was doing. Yes, he was still watching. I guess all the distraction made our chat awkward because a little while later the other couple said sorry and left. Honestly, John, Karen said with a worried tone, you need to stop staring at him. Act like he's not even there. But he's staring at me, I said back. And that really annoys me. He wasn't just looking. He was staring most of the night, wearing a mix of a frown and a smirk on his face. He looked like a grumpy kid, plus he had been drinking too much. That made things worse. It was smart to keep an eye on him. He's just jealous, I said. Karen pouted, glancing around to make sure no one could hear us. I thought he was being very immature. There wasn't much we could do right now, so I suggested we just ignore him. That's the best way to deal with someone who has been bothering you all night. It felt almost as difficult as ignoring someone who is causing you pain. She crossed her arms and shook her leg in annoyance. I wish he would just go home. He's making a fool of himself, she said. Maybe you should take him home. I'm sure that's what he wants. Her face turned red and she opened her mouth to speak, but then looked away. You know, she said with a sigh, I really thought we were having a good time for a while. I agreed. That was before he started staring at me for hours. How could he believe no one would notice? She drank her beverage too quickly. He's acting so childish. She said it again, as if that was the answer we needed. So we sat there for a while. The mood felt off for both of us, and I found myself lost in thought. How did it all begin? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She took a deep breath and didn't meet my gaze. Honestly, Karen, from the tapes and notes, I never really got how it all started. I really don't want to talk about it, and definitely not here. Was it about charm, or were you hoping I'd say I wish it never happened? She snapped. You can skip that part. I wish it never happened. I think about it every single day. I'm not picking at you or trying to pick a fight. I shook my head. I just don't see how you could do this to me. I said, my voice not showing any pain or anger. It was cold. I don't understand how you could do this to us, to the girls. Do you know I would do anything for you? No joke. I shook my head. I would have given everything. There are still things in my life that matter a lot. They just don't involve you. You hurt me. She covered her mouth, trying not to cry. Please, don't do this to me. I shrugged. Fine, I'm sorry. I stared at the sunset. These feelings hit me at strange times, you know? You shouldn't feel like you have to say sorry for that. Maybe I shouldn't, but I really am sorry. I looked around. He's gone. Do you think he went home? I don't want to think about him right now. I glanced at my beer bottle. An odd feeling came over me. So, do you want to dance? She didn't reply. She probably thought I was joking. Come on, I nudged. What do you think? I'm no better off than before, but things can't get worse. Now she was looking at me. I can't believe you would want to dance with me. Why not? There was a pause. I wouldn't want to dance with me either. That's a fair point. Listen, you don't have to figure it out. I don't need to understand it either. Let's just dance. A shy smile crossed her face. There wasn't even any music playing. 2 minutes later, we stood on the grass by the deck, gently moving to the tunes in our minds. We didn't hug or lean on each other or anything like that. We simply held hands and swayed. Some other couples glanced at us now and then, probably thinking they were seeing a sweet moment between us. But it wasn't like that. It felt more like we were agreeing to be friends. She mentioned once, "This is the closest we've been since..." But she didn't finish. I knew what she meant. Her lips moved a little, and I could tell she was thinking deeply. I waited, knowing she would talk to me when she was ready. Finally, she looked at me with sad eyes and said, "I want to be on your side. I want to support those who work to help girls. You're already on that side. You always have been," she scoffed. "Only when it benefits me, or when you've let me down." That's true. There are some rules you won't like. I don't need to like them. Just tell me, and I'll be proud of you. It's really just one thing. And here's the deal. If you ever try to take it away from me, I won't hold back. I would act without hesitation or pity, like taking the life of a stray animal. I would end your life for it. I kept dancing. I didn't speak as a threat, nor did I mean to scare her. It was just a simple truth. To her credit, she didn't stiffen, blink, or react in any way. "That's how I know you care for your kids," she said softly. I felt thirsty that night, so I went to the kitchen for a glass of water. Her phone buzzed on the counter with the screen bright. I took a quick look. There were 17 missed calls, all from that evening. After the party, Saturday morning felt quiet at the grocery store. There were very few people, and most of them were older men. The lady behind the counter noticed me looking around. Maybe she just wanted to chat. She smiled and said, "We call it D-Day." She explained that on Saturday mornings, many divorced dads come to shop. She leaned in, lowering her voice a bit. "I think it's because there aren't any happy couples around, so they don't feel alone." She continued, "Happy families usually stay at home." I just looked at her without saying anything. After a moment, she stood up straighter. I think she realized she might have said the wrong thing. "I'm sorry," she said quickly as she hurried to finish with the packages. "I noticed the ring on your finger and thought that Karen really meant what she said." The next few weeks went by quite smoothly. At home, she was happy, and we worked well together as a family. Her leaving was planned, so it would be easier on the girls. Maybe she was trying to make it easier for me, too. Still, I got tired of staying at home all the time, so I began to take the girls out more while Karen was away. Before summer ended, we went on 2 short trips and explored some interesting places not far from home. I also decided to trade in my old sedan for a newer, bigger van. It was a nice family vehicle, different from the one Karen quickly replaced when she bought a nice camper. Karen went through these trips without her mother quietly, even though I could tell she was hurting from missing out on special moments. She never complained, even as dark circles grew under her eyes and her smile faded. She started taking pills to help her sleep, but I didn't see that helping much. What she did talk about was how these trips were hitting our wallet hard. One evening, surrounded by bills and papers, she said, "I understand you think it's okay, John, and I know I'm not in a place to tell you what to do, but these things aren't necessary, and they're draining our money fast. Spending too much is making us go deeper into debt, and if we don't stop it soon, we may never be able to retire." I just laughed and said, "Who really wants to retire anyway? Look, we have trust funds from my parents' inheritance to pay for college and help the girls start their lives. And your retirement is a long way away. I'm not really going to quit my job. I can't imagine what I would do if I had many years to just sit at home and do nothing." I chuckled a bit. I might just get into some bad habits like drinking too much. She bit her lip and put down the bills and papers. "There was a time when you talked about us selling the house, buying a mobile home, and traveling around the country," she said. "Have an adventure. That would be just for us." I laughed softly and she looked away. "I guess that's all in the past now, right? You couldn't think I'd still want to do that with you." She gave me a sad smile. Still, I didn't think about it for very long. I just acted without considering how it might change my life. So what could I say to that? I thought it was time to share the truth. At some point, we really should sit down and decide how old the girl should be so we can get a divorce without trouble. Her eyes got wide and her face turned white, but I didn't pay much attention to it. She knew this was coming. It was never a long-term plan. I thought once they went to college, they would be busy with other things, but she was already gone, running out of the room. The chair she had been sitting in was tipped over and papers were scattered everywhere. I picked them up and tried to sort them into piles. We had a few days of quiet after that. Then things went back to normal. In fact, everything stayed normal for a few more weeks, and I began to think maybe we had finally found a way to make things work. Anyway, there was no need to think about divorce yet. That was still a long way off. Chapter 7. Winter arrived slowly. The change in the weather meant that instead of the usual dry chill and a little bit of snow, October was wet and dewy. I had noticed that Karen had been coming to the house more often lately, and she had started leaving her phone charging when we went out as a family, but I didn't think much of it. I just figured everything would move along as normal. So I was caught off guard when one evening she sat down on the couch in front of me, looking stressed and tired, and said it was over. "I just can't take it anymore, John," she said. "It's too much stress and I feel ashamed of myself all the time. I can't live like this anymore." I held my breath and waited. She crossed her arms and looked down at them. "You know, sometimes when I'm alone or even when I'm in the shower, I just start crying for no reason. I try to feel better, but I can't seem to do it. I cry and cry and cry. I can't seem to stop." She shook her head sadly. "It's my own fault. I know that." But then she took a deep breath and spoke firmly. "For a while, I really cared about you. I thought I had to go along with you to protect myself. I believed that time would fix the problems I made if I just kept moving forward. Honestly, for a while, I even thought I was lucky." She shook her head again, but this time quicker and with more energy. "Anyway, it's done now. You can do whatever you want, but I want you to understand that it's finished." I stayed still, unable to move except for my eyes. I wasn't ready for this. "I told you what would happen if you tried to take them away from me. I warned you, if you take them away." "What do you mean?" She stopped looking so upset. No, it's not about us. I don't mean the country, John. I'm talking about Carl or me and Carl. It's really over. I told him 3 days ago, and it took me all that time to find the courage to tell you." "That's not right," I snapped back. Even I could tell it sounded silly and not helpful. She saw it too and let out a tired laugh. "That's too bad because it's really over, and I'm so glad to say that. Think about what you're doing, Karen. Think about what will happen if you go through with this." She looked at me with a calmness that surprised me. "You know," she said with a hint of nostalgia, "I used to be really scared of you. You said those terrible things, and you seemed to know everything, even the things I thought you didn't know. You were strict and serious, and you seemed so mad. I thought you were just tricking me. I believed every threat you made was real. It felt like the only way for me to be safe was to listen to your words." She frowned, and I sensed a bit of surprise in her voice. "Was I really that clueless? Or are you just that good? I swear I saw a fierce dog showing its teeth and heard some really scary sounds. I just reacted in fear. I didn't even see that the dog in front of me was hiding in a corner. I didn't realize you were in danger all along." She wiped her eyes. "I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I'm sorry I scared you when you were hurt and left you alone with nothing but your own growling to defend yourself. You can't imagine how sorry I feel for that because you would never treat someone this way. You would never have acted like I did." A sad laugh came from her. "Honestly, I don't even know how to feel about the last 6 months or the whole past year of my life. I know I feel really ashamed. Beyond that, it's like I've been in a fog and it's only now starting to clear." She looked at me, expecting something, but I said nothing. I was a guard at the prison, feeling scared as I watched a prisoner start to understand that she had the weapon all along. She was frightened too. "You know what's funny?" she said. "It's all over now. It was so simple." I looked at him and everything around me faded away. I didn't feel anything. I didn't want anything. All I wanted was for him to disappear. He noticed me looking at him and thought I liked him. He reached out to take my hand. Just his touch made me uneasy. I rubbed my hands together, feeling sick. He made me feel awful. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. When I told him how I felt, he didn't react well. She rolled up her sleeve to show me a bruise that wrapped around her arm. "I don't expect you to be surprised," she said, "but I can't understand why. I threw away my whole life for a man who didn't care about hurting me. Maybe you saw his bad side too, and that's why you told me to stay with him." She studied my face for my reaction, but I didn't show anything. She let out a deep sigh and pushed her sleeve up. "I was such a fool. That's just who I am. Now it's time to see what kind of fool you are. Are you the kind of fool who gives up the only thing you have left to fight for just because things got tough?" Or are you the kind of fool who sticks around even when everything seems lost?" She took a deep breath and a tear rolled down her cheek. "I'll be honest, John. I really hope you're the kind of fool who stays. I just wish." She shook her head again, and a small sob came out. "I'll leave you alone for a bit. I'm sorry for what happened, more than I can ever express." But before she left, she paused, gathered herself, and said, "You really need to eat more, John. It's for your own good. You look too thin." I turned away and she walked off. For a long time after that, I just sat there watching the shadows slowly cross the room, feeling confused and unsure about everything. Around midnight, I got up and rubbed my eyes. "I'm not hungry," I said, even though no one was there to hear me. November felt like a heavy weight. It dragged on, making time feel slow and hard to bear. When it finally passed, we were more tired and worn out than ever. Karen was home all the time now. She still said she had finished her book. I wanted to think she hadn't, but I secretly hoped that she had. She was caring and thoughtful, but also a bit distant. I could tell there were many thoughts and feelings inside her, but she didn't share much with us. To me, she seemed like someone who was just starting to realize how unhappy they were with themselves. Either way, she was quiet. When the girls were around, we both did our best to act normal, but it felt like we had nothing else to fill our days. December was just as difficult, and soon even I wanted her to find her way back to happiness. I can't say why exactly, but I felt worried that it might start affecting the girls. It wasn't until the week before Christmas that she asked me to stay and talk. I could see a trace of worry in her eyes. It was clear she shared her concern with me because I felt it too. We sat down at the kitchen table, each with a glass of wine. She frowned for a long time, looking into her glass. Finally, she looked at me and said, "I don't know what to do, and I need your help." "Help with what?" I asked. "With us, with you, and probably with me too." She picked up her wine glass, but her hands shook a little, and she set it back down. "I keep trying to think of ways to help you feel better or fix the things I've messed up, but I can't find anything that works. I know I've messed everything up, and I know you don't owe me anything for that. All I'm asking for is a chance to make things right somehow. Maybe I can help make what happens next easier for all of us." "I don't really get what you're trying to say," I said slowly. "Yes, you do," she replied with confidence. "I know you understand. Just help me see where we are, John. Help me see who we are. You don't need to do anything else. Don't make any promises. Just share a little with me, please. It's not as small as you think, dear. In fact, you're going to a very tough place." I leaned back and drank all of my wine in one go. "You might not like this," I said softly. "I didn't ask you to make me like it. Good comeback." "Okay, who am I to argue with that?" I looked at her for a moment, noticing the strength in her eyes. "We'll see how long that lasts." "You mean nothing to me," I said honestly. "That's how you feel, nothing at all." But her strength didn't waver. "Explain. What is there to explain?" I held my hands out. "To be honest, I don't even know who this person is, sitting here in front of me. She feels like a stranger. She might have my wife's name or the name she used to go by. But if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that you're not her. My wife had just a little extra weight around her middle, and she was okay with that. You don't have that. You're not her. My wife had long, lovely hair that fell below her shoulders and framed her smile in a way that I loved, and that made her special to me. You don't have that. You're not her. My wife drove a van while you drive an SUV. My wife always put her family first, but you seem to put yourself first. I'm sorry for knowing so much about your life, but I have seen clear signs of the things you like to do in private, things my wife has never done and doesn't want to, so you are not her." I leaned forward. "Do you understand what I'm saying? You are not my wife, you are not her, you are not my wife." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. My wife was an amazing person. Words cannot truly capture her spirit. You'll see what I mean. In a world filled with many women, she was the one who stood out. She was my source of comfort. I really can't explain how much I miss her. As I spoke, my voice wavered and I looked away. She seemed to pull back a bit in her chair, but her eyes were still steady and full of strength. I knew she was getting ready for a tough talk. I think she was saying, I get what you mean, John, even when she turned her head away from my warning look. I know what you mean, but really, looks are just that. Looks. A car is a car. The differences are just small changes. You can't honestly say you prefer me when I've put on a few pounds. She wasn't overweight, don't say that. My face showed patience. A few pounds? She said again. Not like this. I'm in the best shape of my life. Women tell me I look good all the time. I feel more confident than I ever did before. Looking like this makes me happier. Isn't that a good thing? Of course it is. So don't worry about changing back. You can talk to other women. I'm fine with that. I do want you to notice my hair, though. She reached up and playfully ran her fingers through her bangs. It's just hair, John. I know you liked it long, but it was hard to manage. Women in their 30s often get shorter haircuts. They look more grown up. And you can't tell me you don't think this is cute, I laughed out loud. Do you think you can trick me with your feelings? If you could just tell me why I should like the haircut that your boyfriend chose for me. Do you believe feelings just happen by themselves? I just want to say I regret why I decided to make that change. And no, he didn't pick that haircut for me. But that doesn't mean it's a bad change. They aren't relying on my mistakes. I just got a bit careless about how I looked, and I needed to start taking better care of my hair and my body like an adult woman. Like a woman in her 30s who needs to embrace aging and think about how life will change as she gets older. Honestly, I changed my eating habits, started working out, and looked for new haircut ideas weeks before the situation began. You can't say my haircut had anything to do with that. It doesn't mean they are not connected. Do you really think it's just a chance that you felt the need to change how you look right before you decided to explore something on the side, or that you cut your hair short right after Carl said he liked short hair on women? That doesn't mean all those changes happened just because of him. I stopped brushing off her concerns. Are you still doing this? I said, feeling tired of the situation. A bitter sigh came back as she tried to change my mind with arguments and persuasion. It's not going to happen, and it doesn't need to. You know that, right? As much as I miss my wife, I have to say I'm actually glad you're not her. I'm happy that the memories of the person in front of me are different from the memories of the woman I loved. That makes me feel a lot better. I don't want to go back to being a plain guy with tight clothes and messy hair. Then don't. If you think so little of that, then just don't become that guy again. Why do you think I want you to do that? I don't know who made you think this is how you looked before, but you were. I stopped and laughed. Now I'm arguing with feelings too. Let's just drop it, okay, Karen? Just forget it. She looked at me with disappointment for a moment, then relaxed and tapped her finger on her wine glass. Maybe I should ask you something else. I'm listening. If you could, taking a deep breath. I wish you could answer my question without being sarcastic, mean, or just laughing at me. I would really appreciate that. But if you can't, I would understand. I wonder how you would feel if you were in my position. She looked up at me, probably expecting me to laugh at her again. But I just waited. If you were in my place, what would you do if you had messed up? If you had fallen as low as I have? We're all trying to fix things somehow. What would you do to start making it right? Things seem hopeless. Please, just listen, John. You don't need to say anything. You know what I'm asking. I thought for a moment about leaving. I could go away and let everyone have the space they need to heal without me. If it takes a long time, I might never come back. But I know I won't leave my family. No way. You're right, I wouldn't. But I thought it was worth considering. I guess I will do everything I can to try to be the person I once was. The person I used to be, with my beliefs and dreams, kept me from being selfish for a long time. I would let go of anything that didn't fit who I was before. I even tried to open up to people I normally wouldn't talk to, hoping that the shame I felt would teach me a lesson. I took a deep breath and thought about how an affair is a selfish choice. So I aimed not to behave selfishly for a long time. I wanted to get rid of that part of me. She was quiet for a while. That's something to think about, she said. I realized that being unfaithful would mean hurting someone else, even if they didn't deserve it, or even if I thought they didn't deserve it. I would have to hurt them deeply. She winced at this idea. She didn't like it. Why? I paused to think. Well, probably because for a while I put them ahead of you. I was focused on their happiness, even if it was at your cost. Sharing that happiness with them at that moment was more important to me than anything else, even your feelings. If it hadn't been, I would not have done it. I wiped my eyes. I need to show you that while I cared for this other man for a short time, he really meant very little to me in the long run. I would need to go to great lengths to prove it to you. I don't know what that would be, but I would do it. I would do it, and I wouldn't look back. She looked at me, her eyes wide and her mouth open. I believe you would do it, she said softly. We sat there for a bit. There's one more thing, John. If you're going to say you're having a baby— Oh no, I'm not. I saw her shocked expression and I smiled a bit. Very funny, she said. No, it isn't, I replied, still smiling at the shock on her face. She took a moment to think, then said, I don't really know how to talk about it, but— Her eyes glanced nervously at my face and then looked away. I understand you haven't been close to anyone in a while, but this is over. I stood up and walked out of the room. To her credit, she didn't try to follow or stop me. If she had, it might not have ended well. Chapter 2. Daddy? Yes, sweetheart. Can I ask you something? We had just come back from a Friday movie night, and I was more tired than I expected. I really just wanted to get the girls to bed and rest. Come on, honey, I said, feeling exhausted. She pulled at my coat sleeve. To the movies? Yeah, Daddy saved the family because he was strong, right? I kicked off my shoes. Of course he was, honey. Then why aren't you as strong? I paused and closed my eyes. What kind of question was that? I'm pretty strong, honey. No, you're not strong, she insisted. You're thin. I turned to look at Karen. Her face showed a mix of sympathy and, I told you so. Thanks for your help, I thought to myself, feeling frustrated. I turned away from them all. I'm stronger than you think, I said to everyone in the room. I'm stronger than all of you. But a small voice behind me said, But you look pretty skinny. Chapter 10. I can't say for sure how she managed it, but everyone was there. When I came home from work, I found the house packed with people. Every friend and acquaintance I usually met at Bailey's parties was there. Even those who rarely came to gatherings were sitting around, enjoying drinks and laughing. I also noticed a few people I would have preferred not to see, but I didn't spot them at first. As soon as I stepped through the door, Karen jumped up and shouted to get everyone's attention. I need you all in the living room, she yelled. I have a surprise announcement, and I want everyone to hear it. I caught her eye, wondering what was going on. She looked at the people around her, but then she turned away, waving them into the living room. I walked around the corner feeling nervous and my heart racing. In the corner of the room stood Carl. Had she really brought him into my house? After everything she had said lately, after sharing our personal lives, she had Carl in the home where our kids live. Before I could say anything, Karen faced the group. I have something to share, she said. It won't be easy for me, so I hope you all can be a little patient. She looked at me, and I couldn't tell what she was thinking, but she took a deep breath and went on. I want everyone here to know what my husband has done for our family this past year. I've been selfish. I've made mistakes. In return, he has put all his energy into caring for others instead of himself. He focused on protecting our children. I owe him a lot for that, more than I can express. Some people in the crowd glanced my way, confused about what was happening. I felt unsure, too. After all, she hadn't really gone through with it, had she? It didn't take long for everyone to find out what I'd done. That word hit everyone like a loud explosion, and the room went quiet. Suddenly, no one was looking at me anymore. There was nothing wrong with my marriage, my husband, or my life. I just let myself get caught up in something unexpected. I never thought it would go this far. I hurt all of you by letting this happen. Carl looked around the room, looking uneasy. His friends were about to learn just how safe it was to keep him close. Our eyes met, and he looked at me with worry. You're on your own now. Welcome to this difficult place. I had an affair, Karen kept saying. I took time away from my husband and children to be with someone else. I risked everything I had for no good reason. I didn't try to stop it. I thought life should give me something extra. And to make things worse, the man who took me away from those I needed to protect was my husband's so-called friend, Carl Jensen. I let out a sigh and mumbled quietly. He followed me and charmed me, and somehow I allowed it. Even more sadly, I wanted him to. I encouraged it. People glanced around the room, spotting Carl and whispering with their partners. He suddenly seemed very focused on finding his shoes. Some of you have said nice things about how I've changed in the last year, but those changes were partly because of my choice to be with him. It was my way of stepping away from the person I used to be and the ones I cared about. She raised her hands as if to show what she felt. They don't look very nice in that light, do they? Some of you might remember when my husband got sick at one of the parties last summer, even though he didn't drink much. The truth is, he found out that Carl and I were playing a little game. We pretended to be a couple in front of you, and we didn't think about how it would hurt anyone. It was selfish and wrong. Some of you may not want to be friends with me after you hear this, but I hope you can still support John. He is fighting hard for our family and for our daughter's happiness, and it's taking a toll on him. You've all seen the changes. You've noticed how much weight he's lost and how quiet he has become. He feels like he has lost everything. Instead of feeling sorry for himself, he is trying hard to hold on to what he still has. She looked at me again and gave a tired smile before she went on. I want to add that Carl was very clever and good at getting what he wanted. I won't pretend that I was hard to win over, but I must say it was a strong effort on his part. I'm sharing this to warn you all to be more careful than I was. She looked around the room like a teacher waiting for questions. Then she said, "I'm sorry for bringing you all here under false reasons. I regret breaking your trust before. I know the party feels over now, but I hope you will stay, have a drink, chat, and share some stories about me. Ask John how he's doing. Let your kids play downstairs. I'm about to leave, so I won't be in your way." She paused, looking troubled. "It's time I told my mom what I've been doing these past months." Then she walked over to me and reached out for a hug. I gave her a quick hug and stepped back. "You didn't have to do that." "Of course I did." But she looked very sad as she turned to walk away. I watched her walk away and then turned around to see many faces looking at me. I gave a small smile and shrugged. "Is anyone here going to offer me a drink?" What else could I say? A few awkward laughs came from the crowd, but the rest of the night went well. Carl didn't stick around. "You could have given me a heads up." I told her she could have let me know so I could decide if I wanted to go along, but I didn't sound upset. I actually found it funny. I was a bit happy about it too, I guess. She nodded in agreement. I worried something might go wrong. Maybe people would call to cancel, or maybe I would get scared and back out at the last moment. Then you'd see I let you down. I think a small smile crossed her face too. I was also worried that you might try to change my mind, that you wouldn't want me to apologize like that. But it was necessary. I couldn't help but giggle. "You sure managed to do a lot of things at once, didn't you?" "I didn't harm any of them. I just stirred things up and let them go free." She took some of the oatmeal, tried it, and blew on the bowl to cool it down. "You know, not everyone will turn against him. At least some will still stick by him. There will be gossip, but it will fade away after a while, and that will be the end of it. But they won't feel as comfortable around him like they did before. They won't be as relaxed when he shows up at their gatherings. Slowly, they will start to call him less often without even realizing it. Then, they will find reasons not to invite him. They will pull away from him without understanding that's what they're doing." She tried the oatmeal again. "Well, that's what they would do if they had the chance. I've seen that Carl is good at keeping things under control and staying out of trouble. I don't think they will ever get the chance to push him away." I nodded. I agreed. He will spend the next few weeks smiling and pretending everything is okay. But soon, people will notice that he doesn't call them or answer their calls. He will just fade away. Deep down, he is scared. He also complains a lot. And you've taken away all his friends last night. I'm surprised he hasn't been yelling at the answering machine all morning. He would have used my cell phone to avoid you picking up, but he won't do that. Doing so would mean admitting that you hurt him. He will be trying hard to save face, so he won't reach out to anyone. I nodded. Bye. We sat quietly for a few minutes, neither of us eating. I asked, "How do you know I won't get angry or feel embarrassed? After all, last night you made me look foolish in front of everyone we know. If you only knew, I'd be very upset about it." The same little half-smile appeared on her face again, but this time there was a sad look in her eyes. "I never doubted how you would respond to what I said. You are too kind to let little things like how others see you bother you. You always handle every situation with calm and maturity. You give thoughtful answers that show you care about those around you. That's why I knew you wouldn't be upset. That's also why I figured these people would act as they did. They respect you and enjoy being with you. I remembered the support night from last night, and it made me smile. They are truly wonderful people. No, it's you, John. Her face showed disappointment. I wish I didn't think about that. I want to keep seeing all the amazing things about you and not find them boring or expected. She shrugged. I guess that's not right either. I didn't start thinking less of you. I just began to think more of myself. I believed I was better. I felt special without saying it out loud. I thought I was smarter and more deserving than those around me. She looked down at her oatmeal. I realized I was being a jerk. That was something I could agree with, and now it might have cost you some friends. Well, anyway, thanks for last night. I smiled, and I meant it. It was worth it. I took a sip of my coffee. It feels good when we can agree on something. A week went by, and then I got another surprise. I drove into the garage after work on Wednesday, and instead of the almost new SUV, I saw an older sedan. I stared at it for a few minutes, noticing how worn it looked and peeking inside. Some of Karen's things were on the middle shelf. I stepped closer. "Did something happen to the car?" I asked, feeling curious. "Oh," she said, "I just thought I needed a change, something different." "Me?" "You know." She kept busy washing the dishes. It's funny, though, when I got that big SUV, I was really happy about it. I thought it was just what I wanted. I believed it was perfect for me. But then I found out I didn't really like the thing. It felt uncomfortable. When I drove on the highway, I felt like I was steering a huge boat. And it was awful on gas. People change their minds. It happens. She tossed a pot lid into the sink, and it made a loud noise. I can't even figure out what was so special about it. It just made me unhappy. So I decided to look for something else, something that would be mine. The problem was that we didn't have much money. The money I could get for the SUV was barely enough to pay the car taxes and who knows what else, so I had to lower my hopes a little to make it work. She rinsed the lid off the pot and started to drain the water. The hardest thing for me to accept right now is how much I want our old family van back. She reached down and put her hands in the water, but that was fine too. Whenever our family goes anywhere, we always use your van. So I don't really need anything fancy. I just need something to get me around, right? I watched her for a bit. I guess that makes sense. I tried to speak, but I couldn't find the right words. She turned to look at me. There were lines under her eyes, and she didn't seem to expect much. I went back to my room to change and look for my book. Sometimes, when two people know something, it's okay not to say it out loud. I picked up chapter 10. Here we were, getting to know each other better. We had gotten along pretty well for some time, especially since she ended things with Carl. Karen had fully committed herself to her family. She found a way to be loving and present without being annoying. A few weeks after the party, I stopped feeling angry every time she walked into the room. I won't lie. I did take some satisfaction in seeing the dark circles under her eyes and the tired look on her face when she was lost in thought. But I didn't want to encourage those feelings. To outsiders, our teamwork might seem like a good thing. After all, weren't we brought together by a shared goal? Didn't we act like friendly co-workers working on an important project? That sounds perfect, doesn't it? But the truth was no, and the issue was that Karen didn't just want to be friendly co-workers. She wanted a lot more than that, and she wasn't going to let it go. She really needed more emotional support since she had no other way to express her feelings. She stayed patient, but her calmness started to fade. I kept waiting for the moment when everything would change for her. The first signs appeared soon after the party. She started to touch me more often. It was small things like brushing my arm while asking a question or giving my shoulder a quick squeeze while checking on how I had slept. Sometimes she would also give me a fast hug when her friends were around, knowing I wouldn't pull away. I was trying hard to keep my distance because it felt important to me. But every time she reached out for contact, I stepped back. Still, over time, these little actions started to feel strangely normal. I had to try to stay away from them or just tell her to stop. But the bigger issue was that, deep down, I actually liked the contact when it happened. My heart was racing and I felt uneasy. However, I was also very lonely. Even the small, simple gesture of her fingers squeezing my shoulder to say good morning was the most real connection I'd felt in a long time. As much as I wanted to distance myself from her, a small part of me kept wishing for just one more moment to feel human again. Maybe if I had found a way to deal with that feeling earlier on, I wouldn't have felt the need to pull away. But the whole experience felt like a heavy blow, and then being given a chance to leave a final message for your children before it was all over. Here I was, lost in shock, having to use all my quickly fading strength to focus on one thing I thought was important. Everything else didn't even matter. At least that's how I justified it. But that was how I felt back then. I didn't care about myself at all. I felt like a shadow of my former self, invisible. Now, I was starting to venture out into the world, and I hadn't prepared for what might happen when I got there. When she gently touched my arm and asked if the girls liked the movie, it was as if I had found a part of my humanity again. That there was more to life than just existing and thinking about how long it would be before everything ended. And here's the thing about what betrayal does to you. When I read those words now, they feel overly dramatic to me. Yet when I think about how I felt back then, they seem too simple. They are like flat pictures of something that was really rich and complicated. What I mean is, I couldn't give up on physical closeness. This realization scared me because it meant a lot for my future. I knew I wasn't going to fall in love with Karen again. I didn't have any feelings for her anymore. But I saw that these little actions were slowly wearing away at my need for alone time and self-control. I knew I had to fight against this. I knew it had to stop. But then, there was her gentle touch on my neck. Couldn't I have waited a few days before telling her to back off? I kept putting it off. I felt weak for that. I then realized that two things were about to happen that would lead to a bigger problem. First, Karen started to get a bit annoyed with me, and then she began to wear less around the house. There are some things that are hard to explain in a story, like the deep understanding that comes from being close to someone for a long time. It's the little changes in their mood that a stranger might not notice. This small lift in her spirit could have sparked a lot of questions. As time passed, she became more persistent. Friendly touches happened more often. Brief moments apart started to last longer. When I moved away, she would just smile and try again later. Maybe she thought if she could get a little closer, I would eventually give in. But I wasn't anywhere near that. Her frustration grew much quicker than my walls could come down. So it felt like we were heading toward a certain moment. And when we reached it, we were both surprised. It was evening. The kids were already asleep. She reached out to me in a way that seemed relaxed, but it was clear she had another intention with her outfit. When I pulled away again, she frowned and let out a sigh. "Come on, John, I'm really trying. Can't you please let me touch your shoulder for a moment?" I shook my head. What could be more harmless than that? But of course, we both knew my shoulders were tense. I joked, "You'd really have to push down hard to make a difference." I couldn't believe I was overthinking this. There was no need for me to be sarcastic. She sat down in the chair across from me with her arms crossed. "All right, I admit it. I'm trying to get closer to you and we both know it. What's so wrong with that? You're my husband, after all. I must be terrible for wanting this." Her expression softened and her eyes looked hopeful. "I'm a person too, John. I have feelings, and I know you do too. You shouldn't ignore them. I mean, it feels like forever for you. So don't say you aren't a little let down. You must be tired of doing everything yourself all the time." She stopped talking. Something in my face gave away too much. "Oh," she whispered, pulling back her hand. "You can't be serious." She took a deep breath. "You don't do it yourself, do you? You don't do it at all. John, you should talk to someone about this. It's not good for you." "No." I stood up. "No way. I'm not going to sit here and listen to a talk from that guy, Carl. I'm not going to feel bad or guilty because I don't want anything to do with someone who treats me badly. So you can just—" I stopped myself and raised my hands. "I appreciate everything you've done to make my life easier," I said carefully. "I know you want to help. I can see that. But there comes a time when improvement isn't a real goal anymore. Sometimes you help someone heal and things get better. Other times, you can only do your best to make them feel comfortable because that's all that's left. You made me feel at ease. I appreciate that. But now it's time to move on. She crossed her arms firmly, not wanting to give in. You know, sometimes people choose to stay in bed long after their illness is over and done with. They are scared, John. Scared to get up, scared to start living again, scared to think about tomorrow as if it might actually happen. And when the day comes, you need to give them a little push because that's the only way they will truly start living again. I felt a rush of anger and said, "You're a very unkind person, Karen. Do you know that?" I looked at her from head to toe. You used to be a lovely woman with a nice family and a good life, and now you've given it all up for someone else who does not deserve it? Why don't you just go away? I said before she could reply. After that, for the next few days, she acted distant and cold towards me. All the small ways she used to show she cared disappeared like water on a hot day. It got so bad that she barely spoke to me and tried to avoid being in the same room when I was there. I couldn't figure out if she was mad, losing interest, or something else. Her face showed nothing. I found myself feeling a bit sad and surprised. We had spent weeks working well together, and that had felt nice. Even the little touches she used to give made me feel safe and calm. As long as we were on the same path and she was trying to win me back, I didn't have to worry about what might come next. I didn't want to think about the chance that she might leave, go back to Carl, or even get a divorce because she was worn out. I didn't have to worry about unexpected problems or stress waiting around the corner. Most of the time, I liked feeling like we were working together on something, even if there wasn't any romance involved. Now, though, I felt distant from her, and I couldn't help but wonder what she was thinking. There wasn't much I could do but wait for her to talk to me, and that's exactly what I found myself doing. During the workday, I kept thinking about our upcoming divorce. How would it change our money situation? How often would I see my kids? Would she find someone new soon? Would he become a father to our girls? What kind of dad would he be? Old fears started to come back. It really bothered me to think about the girls growing up with someone else as their father. I had missed a lot of important moments in their early years. I learned about everything after it happened, and I was too late to give any helpful advice or support. It felt like I was taking the last step toward being alone. It was like the final breath of my past life. I struggled to stay in one place for more than a few seconds. I paced back and forth until I bruised the underside of my left arm. I found myself drawn to the room where the kids were playing. I kept looking for reasons to join in their fun. I didn't know how much longer I would have to spend time with them, so I wanted to enjoy every moment I could before time ran out. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and saw that breakfast was already made. There was a huge pile of food, way more than anyone could eat. Karen was sitting at the table with a similarly large plate in front of her. The big pile of pancakes, eggs, and sausages looked really funny next to the small and slim woman. "I think you've cooked too much," I said, trying to be funny. As I sat down at the table, Karen just shrugged. "I'll eat my food if you eat yours." I said, "You couldn't finish that even if you had all day." Karen smiled playfully and said, "I bet I can eat more than you." I tapped my fork on my plate, looked at the food, and then noticed her cheerful smile. "What's that, Karen? Is it a note or a game?" I asked. "No, it's a challenge," she said, pointing to the food. "This is what we're going to tackle next together." Then she quickly speared a piece with her fork, and her smile got even bigger. "Let's enjoy this together," she said, taking a big bite. I looked down at the food again. "What if I'm not hungry?" I asked softly. "Come on," she said, chewing. I didn't want to. Okay, I said, laughing at her funny expression. I even ate the food. So what? It was nearly summer when something unexpected happened. Maybe it was the little extra weight she had put on after all those big breakfasts we shared. Or maybe it was because I was feeling healthier again. We were never really overweight, though. What kind of story do you think that makes? Or perhaps it was something different. Maybe it was the calmness in the air or her new haircut. She had cut it into a bob that honestly didn't suit her. But she wanted to try new styles once it grew back. Maybe it was just the changing seasons. Maybe it was all about the springtime feeling or something. No, I'm trying to make excuses. I was honestly drunk. I was very drunk. It's funny how time matters in this story. It's a bit embarrassing because I didn't even give him a name. I never told you about him or what he was doing or thinking. I never bought him flowers or even said goodnight. but it feels like time has taken control of my life now, and it will continue to do so in the future. Hate, anger, fear, and love, they're all in the hands of time, and he uses them as he wishes. If I ever decide to write another story, I'll start with this one. You hear stories about people getting out of dull marriages and acting wild, taking risks with everything they have. But the truth is, not having a romantic life at all is still a kind of living, and your body notices it. This might be the first time you feel that shift. After a while, your body gets used to the lack of connection, making it hard to even think about love. I know that for a long time, I barely thought about it at all. There I go again. But then Karen suddenly started to seem and sound like my Karen, my wife from long ago. She wasn't the same person from before. It was surprising how much that change meant to me. And that night turned out to be a good one. We spent the time with friends. I drank a bit more than normal and laughed a little louder. We danced again, and you know how it goes. You might think this is where everything got better. You might nod, thinking this is the part where all is forgiven, and I should believe in a happy ending. But that's not true. No matter how much Karen had been through and how much she had grown that year, some things would never be the same. Outbursts of anger or bitterness would surprise me and take over my thoughts. They were really hard to handle. A piece of who we used to be was gone and couldn't be replaced. To be honest, I stopped being myself. I changed because of her betrayal just as much as she did. It took me a long time to see that. So what was different? I guess I was quieter. I cared less about what was happening around me except for the girls. I used to trust the mother of my children more than anyone else, but I can't be that person anymore. I felt angry at him for what happened because of that trust. So, I think there's a kind of loneliness that stays with you no matter what choices you make. But it can be managed, and most of the time I can put it aside so it doesn't control my choices. If you're strong enough, you can do anything. In the 6 months since that first tough time, Karen and I have shared moments together a few more times. I don't know a better way to say it. We've never been wild or very passionate, and we've only shared the simplest of feelings. It never really felt like it means anything, or that we were saying something special to each other during those times. She seemed to take it all as normal, but she changed a lot while she waited for me to come back. In the end, I think she understood that she wasn't really expecting anyone. I came home that day and found her waiting for me. She had a bottle of wine and a large envelope. "It's an apartment," she said to no one in particular. Her eyes looked dull as she stared straight ahead. I watched her sitting there, trying to stay strong as she ended our time together. I felt like I was witnessing how it all came to be. I was a bit impressed by how calm she was. I looked at the envelope. "Is it for me?" She shook her head. I nodded. I didn't ask why. While she was away, I had many adventures with the girls. Those moments had created a bond between us that she couldn't break into. She tried, but things were already settled. The best she could do was stay apart. So she did what she promised. She was putting the girls first. "You don't have to," I said, unsure if I really meant it. "No, I have to," she replied. "We're doing a good job as it is. It's been a long time, John, long enough for us to get it right. The girls are doing well." She tapped her wine glass. "None of us are really living our lives. Soon these kids will be old enough to understand what that means. They will start to think about what it shows about us." She tipped the glass back, drinking the wine down. "Don't you want to show them what it means for an adult to be happy?" "I want them to be happy, but maybe you are right. This might be the next step to make that happen. Can we pay for it?" She nodded but didn't say much. Her mouth just opened slightly. "It will be tough, but I can work harder. You're already working harder." Another nod. "I set things up for the girls. They should stay here with you. I'd like to come over in the evenings and spend time with them if that's okay. I promise not to be a bother." She pressed her lips together. "But if you try to keep me from them, I will be really upset." I smiled wider than I thought possible. I put my hand over hers. "I'm so glad you are back," I said. That was all we needed to say. In the first few months after finding out my wife had been unfaithful, I often wondered if I made the right choice. I know I was not thinking clearly, and many experts would say I was wrong to stay in the situation. Some might even ask how I could hide so much hurt. I can't really answer them except to ask if they have ever seen the bright smiles of two joyful children, even during tough times. Every moment I spent with my girls helped me escape my sadness. They were the comfort I needed most. I won't pretend I was calm and collected then, but I also can't say I would have made different choices if I faced the same situation today. I might be a bit biased in how I share this story, and I apologize for that. It's easier for me to focus on things I don't regret, so that's what I want to share with you. I don't regret putting my pain aside to be a good parent. That's what matters to me. I don't regret trying to help my children, so my words come out easily. But as someone who thinks about right and wrong, it's hard for me to think about what I did in relation to Carl. But there's more to it. I didn't mention that, did I? It's tough to face what you wish you hadn't done. Lately, it feels like the world is filled with sadness. It hurts to remember the part I played in that, even when I thought my actions were right. Years later, when the girls were in the 2nd grade, they gave me a small but very meaningful trophy for my success. They were already tall and had become young people who made me proud in a way that sometimes stings. One day, they came home from school and told me about a friend who was having a really hard time. Her parents were getting a divorce. "That's so sad," the older one said. "Her dad lives in an apartment, just like her mom's, but it's even harder because he lives far away. Since summer, she only sees him on weekends. She says there's so much going on in her life that she often forgets to tell him about it all. She worries he might feel like he doesn't know her anymore. At least her parents don't argue all the time like they used to." My youngest chimed in, "Do you remember when we were there on the 4th of July and they started yelling at each other? It was terrible." Then she looked at me, her eyes wide and shiny. "We missed all the fireworks because we spent the whole night trying to help poor Elizabeth stop crying. Her parents were so caught up in their fight that they didn't even check on her. I doubt they even noticed she was upset. My oldest said they probably thought Elizabeth was having a good time instead of suffering because of their fight. But really, they were too wrapped up in being angry to think about anyone else." My youngest nodded in agreement. "They are still like that now. They always say mean things about each other when she is around." She shook her head sadly. "I'm so glad you and Mom never had to go through anything like that, Dad. I don't know what we would have done." I thought about it for a moment. I could never get so angry that you wouldn't be my top priority. I told them not to argue with anyone, not about anything. I hope that one day I'll be as good a mom as you are, Dad." She smiled. I chuckled. "Don't worry. There's a special kind of love a parent has for their child that makes everything better. It may sound a bit strange or even a little scary, but it's better than anything else you'll ever feel. You two take up so much space in my heart, and you hold it so well that I have a little bit left, and that's all I need. Someday, when you have kids of your own and they look at you and smile, I think you'll understand what I mean." So, I leaned on the counter. "I don't suppose you'd like to try a slice of pizza?" Thank goodness they seemed interested. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.